Good morning, and thank you for tuning in to Behind the Scenes at the Hanover Theater. This is Lisa Condit, and I'm here today to talk with one of the sons of the late Ricky Nelson about the upcoming show at the Hanover Theater called Ricky Nelson Remembered. Welcome. How are you today?
This is Gunnar Nelson, and I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Excellent. So, Gunnar, first of all, I know this sounds like a crazy thing, but I love your name. And was there a story behind that name that you know of, some family history?
Well, I come from a family of Swedes.
Me
my
too.
father's real name was Eric. His father was Anders, or his father was Oswald. Ozzy's father was Anders, and his father was Magnus. So it's a very proper Swedish name. It's spelled Gunnar. And he always knew that one of us was going to be Gunnar, and it was supposed to be the firstborn. But I was a difficult birth. I was breech with the cord wrapped around my neck. So he said, that one's a fighter. He's going to be the Gunnar. So that's me.
Oh, that's awesome. So I can only imagine what it was like to grow up as part of the Ricky Nelson family.
Well, I mean, to me, it was just normal, obviously. I mean, I hate to sound trite, but it was all relative to me. I didn't know any different. I up until I was like 10 years old, I thought everyone's dad was a rock star.
I know, right?
So, yeah, I mean, to me, what was really cool is that I grew up with a lot of social proof that making music at the highest of levels was possible. And, it wasn't just a pipe dream because my family had been entertaining for about 100 years. So it was just something that I was kind of born into and something that I always knew was possible because of all the art and creativity around me all the time. And I'm really grateful for that.
Isn't that great? We have a couple things in common, although they might be stretches for most people listening. One, we're both Swedish, so we like that. And two, my parents grew up in California. My mom went to Hollywood High, and the same type of thing where, although I grew up out here, creativity and artistic endeavors and music was always a really important part of just growing up and living and what's important. On the other hand, my father was a jet fighter pilot and a professor of physics, so we definitely had some balance there. That said, music was always really important to us. Out of curiosity, what was the first instrument you learned how to play?
I was a drummer, actually. That was my first thing. I actually loved the drums. I started playing when I was 6 years old. Matt got his first bass at 7. And we actually had our first recording session at 11. We started playing the LA club scene professionally when we were 12. Our first record deal at 18, made our album called After the Rain, and had our first number one at 22 years of age.
Isn't that amazing? So you must have a very unique perspective on the child stars of today, especially with the Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. Any differences besides the obvious that you can think of right off the bat as far as...
No, are you trying to relate the child stars and all that stuff to, let's say, my dad's career? Or I just want to make sure that I understand the question, because if it was to that, I don't think there's really any real comparison between my dad's career and child stars. I think if my dad's career had stopped at 16, rather than just taken off at 16, I think we could probably make that comparison. But this is a guy that had like 10 careers in one lifetime. He grew up on the Family Show as the irrepressible, burr-headed, I don't mess around boy Ricky, and then reinvented himself right there at 16, starting to do his rock and roll, and then reinvented himself again with the whole country rock thing much later in his life. So, this was a guy that really spent his entire life entertaining and achieving, and I think it was actually a really good thing that his parents were also entertainers who were right there at his side that could constantly encourage him, which they did, and it also gave him the impetus to never really rest on his laurels and always try new things.
Well, I think that is a great point that you raise, and definitely he kept recreating himself successfully, and he didn't seem to get caught up in what today's stars and celebrities really got caught up in. But as you were describing your own musical success and your own first professional gigs and your own first recording contracts, that's interesting to me because, you haven't led the same path that the current generation has lived. And so I just wanted to see if you had any insights about that.
Well, I do. As a matter of fact, I think back in the day, and even so, actually, my brother and I touched on it with our generation as well. There was a time right around the corner, back in the day that you actually were famous because you had a skill that set you apart. Mm-hmm. You actually are famous for a reason. You did something in an outstanding fashion that required a lot of discipline and a lot of time and a lot of courage to pursue. The difference that I suppose that I'm seeing today, which is kind of unfortunately kind of a commentary on like what is really going on in this country right now, which we need to address, I think, and hopefully we will in my lifetime, is that we're seeing a whole legion of people that are famous just for the sake of being famous, and that's truly not the way it was back in my grandparents' day. Clearly, it wasn't the way it was in my dad's day, and when my brother and I were doing things, I remember we were like the last of the late great '80s hair band, so to speak. We actually we ended the whole confidence rock generation, and basically they went right to the whole Seattle sound thing after that. But even so, you were actually it was just kind of normal. You were expected, if you called yourself a musician, to be able to write your own material, play your own instrument, sing your own songs without computer assistance. And I like to refer to myself as an analog man in a digital world. Am I a throwback? I suppose so, but I know when I'm editing something on a computer, I grew up in a time when I was actually sitting there with some analog tape and a razor blade making my edits.
Right.
So, those were a pain in the butt to do, and in the studio, you wanted to avoid those at all costs, so you had to get it right the first time. There weren't multiple takes that you just kind of cut and pasted together. And I'm really lucky. I feel lucky that that's what I came from. I mean, but when you sit there and you're growing up around guys at the house with an acoustic guitar in their hand, like Bob Dylan, or Jackson Browne, or Linda Ronstadt stopping by, all of those people, you're expected to throw down. When the red light goes on, you got to be able to do it. When there's an audience that's there expecting to see a show, you better bring it.
Right.
And nowadays, I just think it's really more, it's more about product and selling product than it is about marketing art. And that's a shame. And celebrity nowadays seems to be more about lighting yourself on fire and doing something that's outrageous than actually doing something that's wonderful and special. That's, it's just two schools of thought, and whichever school you want to go to, it's your prerogative, of course, but I guess I go to the old school.
Well, it's interesting because you raise the point of talent in its purest sense versus that creative process versus the artificial. It's almost like our food, you had your raw talent and your original creativity versus the product that is artificially edited, what else? It's like everything is so preserved in a
Well, I think there are two different worlds that you can subscribe to. One is the one of commerce, and the other is the one of art. And very rarely throughout music history, those two worlds have collided in a beautiful way. The Beatles are a great example to me. But you know what? Even though they were incredibly well marketed, biggest band in history, there was never, ever, ever, ever a lack of, or was that a substitution for talent?
Right.
The talent was always there. First and foremost, that was always there. And then past that point, it was always about marketing it. Those guys were the real deal, and they were the goods.
Well,
and in my family, I suppose what was always expected is that you brought the goods.
Right.
No matter what.
It's the substance that backs up the style that I think you're talking about.
That's right.
What are some of the really key things that you remember, some of maybe your favorite songs, some of your favorite visitors that you're talking about to the house? What are some of those formative memories?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of them. I mean, my next door neighbor was George Harrison.
Oh, come
on. Bob Dylan was over the house all the time, writing with my dad and stuff. Mama Cass Elliot was my babysitter.
Seriously? You're making us all jealous right now.
You got to remember when this was. I mean, I was born in '67 in the Hollywood Hills.
Right.
And during that time, it was a really remarkable creative time. We're in Southern California, down at the Troubadour Club. With my dad, you had guys playing like the Byrds and the Hollies, and our dad's producer at the time, who was present the night of my birth, was a guy named John Boylan, and he was the one that was responsible for putting a backing band together for Linda Ronstadt, who he was also producing, that wound up becoming the Eagles 2 years later.
How fun!
So, all that stuff. It was ground zero for this great California country rock sound, and I was blessed enough to be around that and just kind of regard that as that was just normal.
Yeah.
I ask all these guys. I had a conversation with John Fogerty about a year ago. We got to play together when he came to Nashville, and I got to jump on stage at the Ryman. And we were backstage, and we were having a conversation. And I asked him, I said, John, when you were actually, back in the day, you were walking down the beach, and the melody for Proud Mary came to you. And you started writing this song. By the time you got back home, you had the song finished and stuff, and then you recorded it with your brother. The question I've got for you is, when you guys actually recorded that thing and heard it coming back through the speakers for the first time, did you realize how special it truly was?
What did he say?
Or was it just a Thursday, and was it just another song? And he said, well, we wrote a lot of songs and played a lot of songs. I mean, I liked the song, but I didn't know that it was going to do what it was going to do. And I don't think any of us know what kind of an impact any particular song is going to have. You just do the best you can every single day and, hope something connects with people. And I know my dad felt the same way about that with everything that he was doing. I mean, you run the risk as a songwriter of falling in love with your latest tune. But, I remember asking my dad if he knew how special Garden Party was, for example, when he wrote it. And he did, only because in that instance, that was really kind of his spiking the ball in the proverbial end zone after a lifetime of people expecting him to be a certain person or act a certain way. And he got booed off the stage at an oldies festival being played at Madison Square Garden when he started playing his new tunes. His statement was, you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself. He knew it was at least special to him because that was a statement, that was something he'd been wanting to say since he was a child actor. He'd been wanting to say that, and I think it's really cool because it leaves us all with a legacy, no matter what you do, that we can connect with.
We're going to go to a short break, and then we'll be back with more behind the scenes at the Hanover Theater here on WCRN AM 830. Welcome back to Behind the Scenes at the Hanover Theater as our conversation with Gunnar Nelson continues here on AM 830 WCRN. And it's interesting because you were talking a little bit about growing up in Hollywood Hills, and I think I mentioned that my family's from California. My mom went to Hollywood High. They had a house in Hollywood Hills. And to hear my grandparents and my parents talk about how just the neighborhoods themselves changed and who was living in the different neighborhoods. It seemed like back in the 50s and 60s, everybody still lived in the Hollywood Hills, whereas now it really isn't quite like that anymore. Maybe part of that is because we have faster transportation and it's easier to get in and out of remote versus urban environments. But do you think that Hollywood will come back? Do you think it's cyclical where, as our society kind of goes back to, think about it, you and your brother, you dominated MTV in the early 90s, right? That's one of the
when MTV was actually playing videos. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I remember growing up. Oh my gosh, I remember when they aired the first, the first video altogether. And I remember the MTV Sign on the Moon, and I would be hard pressed to find a music video on MTV right now. It
has changed quite a bit. But the only thing that's consistent is change. That's
Yes.
the only thing that we can really plan on. And I think it's really important. For me, I spent a lot of time actually thinking about that. I think it's important to spend half your time being proud of your past and half your time with your eye on the horizon and looking towards the future and constantly pushing yourself. Reinventing oneself, no matter what it is you do in life, is really challenging because we get comfortable. We're all creatures of certainty. We try to hold on to that. But, this world is moving faster and faster and faster every single day, with technology being what it is, and instant gratification and information right at our fingertips at any time. That's great that we've got access to that. But the downside is that we've developed a fast food mentality where we're going for quick cuts and at the movies. I mean, I'm a big movie fan. I go to the movies and I see movies that have really weak stories, but everything's really hung on their special effects. And for example, I mean, I think they're great movies that that really pushed the limits back in the day with great special effects back in the day to look really dated now. If you look at the first Star Wars
I was thinking that too.
I mean, I grew up with that, and I love that. I mean, I'm a big fan. Right now, it looks kind of cheesy. However, the story was just really groovy.
Yes.
Really cool story, really fun acting. Everything about it was really thought out. And, of course, Spielberg knows how to tell a story. But that's what it comes down to as a songwriter. You just got to tell a story.
Right.
And it's got to be a story worth telling. And then at that point, it doesn't matter if you're telling that story, as I grew up learning, it doesn't matter if you're telling that story with an acoustic guitar and one voice, or if you're doing it with a full production and the most modern technology. Good story is a good story. Good song is a good song, and you're trying to capture a moment, and basically we're all just communicators, no matter what it is we do. You could be somebody that actually works in an office, or you could be somebody that's on a TV series. But your job is to really communicate with people and share your life experience. And I've got the benefit of growing up in a family that's made a job of doing just that for over 100 years.
Oh, it's totally fun and really great. So it's interesting you brought up 50% in the past, 50% in the future, and here we are. We're talking about this great show, Ricky Nelson Remembered. So talk to us a little bit about how you're going to be honoring the past and moving forward, perhaps in this context too.
Okay, it's a lot more than people expect. We found this is important to note. It is not a tribute show. This is a celebration. Matthew and I are not trying to be Ricky Nelson. Okay, we're trying to just celebrate his life, his times, and what he contributed. This is a guy that sold 280 million singles in his lifetime.
Amazing.
He actually was personally responsible for smuggling rock and roll into mainstream American living rooms at a critical time in its history. He is credited by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, of which he has been inducted, as being responsible for founding the first ever true country rock band. And despite all of that, he was the nicest guy in the world. He was really approachable and really down to earth and really cool. I know it's normal for any sons up to deify their father who's passed, but in this case, the guy really deserves it. I find it ironic that this is the last show my father would have ever done for himself because he was so humble.
Aww.
But fortunately, God made twins to be able to do it for him in stereo.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and this show is really a lot more than just a concert. Again, it's important to note that he was also the most televised rock star in history, having been on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet for 14 and a half years and 435 episodes. So we can pull from all of that great material, and we can actually incorporate that into the show, which we do. So the show is best described now as a high-energy rock concert meets an A&E biography episode.
Cool.
It's a real education through video and song in not only what was going on in our family's life, but in everybody's life in America post-World War II and to now. It celebrates really the history of rock and roll, which is a very short history. I mean, it has not been around for very long. So you might come in, if you knew a couple of the songs, perhaps you grew up with the series, or you liked our dad's looks, whatever, but you're going to leave with a whole education that really goes down with a giant spoonful of sugar. It's pretty cool. It's really grown and built into that over the last 8 years.
I like the fact that you referenced the spoonful of sugar, yet another classic that's come back and thrilled our audiences in the recent past. Still great messages with that Mary Poppins. I love it.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, we have had so much fun talking to you, and I think you got across the point that this is not a tribute show. It's a celebration. I love the fact that you're able to combine your beautiful harmonies, live music, and a rock and roll kind of concert, and yet you have this great video. You have this great, I assume, do you have audio clips, too, that you mix in, or?
Oh, big time. And it's not just from the show. We've got great interviews and comments from his friends like Paul McCartney and John Fogerty and Chris Christopherson and Chris Isaac and on and on and on. It's really cool. I know it's normal for me to be sitting here pumping the show and stuff, but it's something that we've really become very proud of. It's a show that we do because we love to do it, not because we have to do it. And you can really feel that when you come to it. It's a really great night.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. So the way people can find out more information is they can go to our website, thehanovertheater.org. We'll be posting this interview on our blog. You guys are coming Friday, August 2nd at 8 p.m. This is a really reasonably priced show. Our Woo card holders and members get a special discount. It's going to be a lot of fun, right?
Oh, it's going to be a blast. It's I promise you, if you get your tush off the sofa You get in the family minivan, you come down to the theater, we're going to make it more than worth your while. We're going to give you a memory you're never going to forget.
Okay, so you're saying Mom-mobiles unite, grab every generation and come down to the Hanover Theater.
Absolutely, and Matthew and I also take pride in meeting everybody after the show and having a little bit of a visit. It's kind of our favorite part of the show because, our family has always been in the connection business. We've never really been in the entertainment business. So hopefully we'll get to visit with everyone down there and share a night. It'll be great.
And that is so smart of you to point out that it is connection, and it is so refreshing to talk to people who really appreciate their fans. We can't wait to meet you. We can't wait to give you a big, warm Worcester welcome. So again, everybody, you can preview the show, buy your tickets online at thehanovertheater.org. Gunnar, it has been such a pleasure talking to you, and I can't wait to meet you in person.
Well, same as that, and we will see you there.
We will see you at the theater, Gunnar.